Well, I don't know if there's any Jimmy Walker, but there's plenty of Dynamite. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Bellator Dynamite MMAfighting.com preview show. My name is Luke Thomas. A lot to get to, and to help me break it all down is the master of disaster, one of the best journalists in the entire sport, Dave Meltzer. Dave, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
All right, so Dave, there's so much to get to. Let's start with an overview of this. When you came here and you saw this and you had heard all about it, and obviously has a precedent historically in Japanese MMA, now that you see it here, now it's all becoming real, do you think it can work?
I think there's, in the end of the day, it depends on the fights. If they're good fights, it will probably work. It's weird because, I've been to Scott Coker's shows in the 90s when he had a lot of different styles of fights all in one night. And the more action the fight was, no matter what the style, it was cool. It didn't really matter the style. But when you had like a really wild fight and then you had you went to a different rule set with a not so good, not so wild fight, it took the crowd down a lot. Because they're kind of used to, like I'll give you an example, but we're not going to have that here, in the sense that you won't have as limited a rule set in some of the fights. So you got MMA and you got kickboxing. If the kickboxing fights are good, it'll work. The MMA fights are going to be what the MMA fights are. I mean, they'll probably be good enough, and it's going to be largely an MMA crowd. So I mean, as far as like the kickboxing, if it's good action, it'll work. If the kickboxing gets slow, it'll slow the crowd down for sure.
Do you like the idea of the tiered system that Scott Coker has talked about? He told me in my interview yesterday there's going to be the Bellator standard shows, there's going to be the tent poles, and then once, maybe twice a year, what we're seeing here today, the Dynamite brand. Do you like that three-tiered system?
I do actually a lot. I mean, it's hard because the original, the normal Bellator show, kind of you're going to know going in, hey, this is just a normal show. I mean, you're kind of telling people if you only want to see a few, you got a few big fights a year. But I do like the idea of one giant show a year that's different from all the others, and it's your big event of the year, and people know when it's going to be. And if you have it at the same time every year, I think that you can build a tradition like Japan did with New Year's Eve.
So it's interesting to me because I was at the Kimbo Slice fight with Ken Shamrock, the last big Bellator show, let's say, not a Dynamite, but big. And that was interesting because he was getting New York Times media coverage. I haven't seen that, but you and I both know that this at the gate is going to be the biggest Bellator gate ever. Right. It's going to exceed 12,000, maybe 13,000. I heard this morning there was only 900 tickets left for the whole thing.
Really?
Right. So
that's awesome.
Right. So I'm wondering, how would you define the terms of success for this event? Because I don't know if they can match Kimbo on TV, but from the live event perspective, it seems like it's going to be a big hit.
Well, a lot of that's the arena. Like this is a city and an arena that's got a history of supporting MMA. Now, as far as the gate, it's already a success. I think anything over 10,000 was going to be a huge success. I actually thought anything over about 8,500 would be good. As far as TV goes, I don't expect it. Ken Shamrock and Kimbo Slice were such big ratings names historically. Tito is too, so I think it'll do well. But I don't think it'll break that record. So I guess what I would say is success would be if you beat the Bonner thing, I think that it's a success. If you're in the range of the Bonner thing, it's all right. If you're much lower than the Bonner thing, that wouldn't be a success.
Could it match, let's say, the average numbers for a UFC on Fox? Let's say 2.5 mil ish.
No, because they didn't do that overall from start to finish. The main event with Tito could, but I mean the problem with the main event is that it's probably going to be on after midnight. So that's going to hurt it a little bit on a Saturday night. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Any concern about the length of the event? You just sort of alluded to it. There's going to be 7, now 8 fights, right? Because you have to catch the 2 fights in the tournament. Is that too much? Or if the fights hit just right, it could be an epic event that everyone remembers?
It depends on the quality of the fights. If you go in there and somewhere in the middle you have like 2 stinkers in a row, and it's going to be too long. But I mean, you never know with MMA, and you never, you know what I mean? If everything's good, it'll be too short at 3+ hours. So it's up to the fights, and and the fights these are hard fights to like look at and go, hey, this is going to be a great fight, this is going to be a bad fight. I mean, it's like there's a lot of questions in a lot of these fights.
And to me, it's also interesting because on the one hand, I feel like this is Scott Coker's dream. He's talked about it, but I mean, I don't think he was hamstrung by Showtime, but it does feel like Spike has afforded him more creative freedom. I think you see that, but I'm also wondering, how much of it, when I say creative freedom, is just the freedom to be derivative of Japanese MMA. How do you classify what's happening here?
I mean, I don't think he makes any bones about it. Scott grew up as a promoter. with K1. So he went to those K1 mega shows at, the Tokyo Dome and Budokan Hall and places like that, and saw that big production, and he fell in love with it, and he wanted to bring it here. And yeah, I don't think he ever had the financial backing to do it to the degree that Spike has given him. So now you're getting his vision of a big show, and I mean it's good because the whole thing is you don't want to be UFC. If you're going to be exactly like UFC with lesser fighters, then it's not going to be. This is like the entertainment spectacle with relatively named fighters, and you're trying to draw, in theory, like people who are just there to be entertained for a couple of hours, and with names that they recognize.
If you're going to pivot, you might as well pivot all the way, right?
Yeah.
So let's get into some of these fights. The main event, we'll start with that. Tito Ortiz trying to get another world title by taking on Liam McGeary. He turned down a rematch with Frank Shamrock to get it. Do you like that choice? I mean, obviously from an entertainment standpoint.
I don't like the choice, and I'll tell you what. Number one, in this building, that would have been gigantic. Frank Shamrock fighting here again. But for Tito, it's like I understand where Tito's coming from, because him beating Frank is not going to prove anything today. Frank's been retired for years. But as far as for Tito, I think that he stacked the odds against himself really large. I mean, you're talking about a young, very good, upcoming fighter who's undefeated. And, Tito didn't look that great against Bonner. If Tito just blew through Bonner, maybe you would go, hey, you know what? Maybe he found the fountain of youth. But he's a 40-year-old guy with a lot of injuries. Does he have a chance to take him down and hold him down and do some ground and pound? Yeah, because McGeary can be taken down. Can he do it for 3 rounds? Probably not. I don't see that.
One thing about Tito, though, that I think a lot of people sleep on, because he is a subject of derision and people like poking fun at him. Everyone seems to do it. But the fact is, when he was getting into Bellator and he was supposed to fight Rampage and they were hitting each other with hammers on TNA, people were sort of pitying him. Here he is. He beat Stephan Bonner. He was not expected from an odds standpoint to beat Alexander Shlemenko. He torched him. And here he is today. Bellator in the end, I'm not saying it rejuvenated his career, but it was great for him.
Yeah, no, it was a great move. I mean, because he was thought of being done, other than the Bader fight, which was that one great moment, which you thought you would never duplicate. And here, he has a chance to do that again. I mean, it would be a great story. It'd be wonderful if he could win. But, I mean, let's face it, the odds are, I saw, that's 11-1 this morning?
Yeah, it's pretty significant.
That was pretty significant, yeah.
All right, and Liam McGeary, the cameraman and I were talking about this, and he and I believe, Liam McGeary could be a breakout star for them. He's got a look. He's good at media. Obviously, his burgeoning skills are incredible. How did he slip through the fingers of the UFC matchmakers?
Yeah, I don't know because my memory of Liam McGeary is that one submission that he got. I mean, when he was in side mount and he got the triangle. I mean, that's one of the best submissions I've ever seen. And he's got the length, he's got the kickboxing skill. I mean, for Liam McGeary, he should be so thankful for Tito, because he's going to have a spotlight on him like he's never had before, and he wouldn't have with any other challenger here. Like if he fought Newton or even King Mo or whoever, it wouldn't be as big as a television spectacular for his name as a win over Tito, because so many people are going to be watching.
And then you move into the meat of what I call the main card. You have the 4-man tournament. This is what I feel like. This is the nod to the hardcores. It's the nod to the casuals because of the arrangement. But these are the 4, absent Liam McGeary, these are the 4 best fighters on the card. Maybe you could say, I'll put together. Do you like the 4 fighters chosen? And given that, who do you like to win the whole thing?
Well, I think they're the best 4 that they had. So, I mean, I think that if you're going to do it, that was the weight class to do it in, and these were the guys. So as far as it's the best that they were going to do. So, yeah, I like it a lot, and it's intriguing. I mean, I guess you go with Phil Davis or Mo, because, I mean, I think they're the favorites in those 2 fights, and then in the final, Mo does have more experience striking, and he is a good enough wrestler that you would think he would be able to avoid the wrestling. And Phil Davis is really all wrestling and kind of very rudimentary striking. But he's a younger wrestler, obviously, and he's kind of a physical freak and everything. I mean, those are the 2. I mean, I can when I watch the style matchup, I can kind of see a way that Mo can win this one. But it all depends on who has what kind of damage in the first fight. I mean, that's the beauty of a tournament, is that it's there's so many different ways it can go.
Let me ask you, let me jump in real quickly. Do you like the rules in terms of the injury substitution that they have? for this particular tournament. It's a little bit twisted. Yeah. Are you a fan of that, or would you have preferred a different way?
I don't like the idea of a guy losing and then advancing, because I think that there's a mental thing where I think a guy who's losing a fight may go for an injury to the other guy, and I don't like a guy to be rewarded. You know, an injury that's not going to beat a guy, you know, because if you lose, you can go on if he's injured. So I don't like the idea of rewarding that. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the way the rules are, it can happen. So, yeah, I don't like that.
Very quickly, let's go through the rest of the card here. You've got Josh Thompson making his return to the house that Scott Coker built in a way, in what appears to be something like a tune-up fight. Do you like it for Josh Thompson? I'm a big fan of the Bellator/Strikeforce tune-up policy. Are you?
Well, I mean, it's good. He's in this. We're going to see what he's got. I mean, he didn't look good his last couple of fights.
Okay, but Tony Ferguson is a far cry from Mike Bronzoulis.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the idea obviously is to get him ready for, you know, Will Brooks, Michael Chandler, and this is the way to do it. So yeah, and I like those fights, especially if Josh is all the way or 90% of what he was. I mean, he'll be a fight for those guys because of his experience and, you know, and on a big stage.
There's a Glory title fight in the line, but I want to focus on Paul Daley, who's a Bellator fighter, sort of moonlighting in the Glory ring. Do you like this for him? He's fighting another Bellator fighter, not one who's sort of known as an accomplished kickboxer. Seems like another setup fight for him, but in a way that enables him to do some expert matchmaking down the road.
Yeah, I think I think the mentality behind it is like, let's take these guys and take them out of their element. And Daley's obviously a much more experienced kickboxer than Gonazlez, so. You know, it looks like it's something. I mean, they're obviously. I think the mentality here is to build Paul Daley against Josh Koscheck in England next year, which is, you know, an intriguing fight. And, you know, under kickboxing rules, I mean, this fight will be broadcast in the UK. He can, you know, if he gets a good knockout in that, and kickboxing probably affords more of an opportunity of a knockout. Maybe, you know. So I think that's the idea behind it.
And then very quickly, the wife of Gilbert Melendez, Carrie Ann Taylor Melendez, taking on she's taking on Hadley Griffith. Seems like nothing but a showcase thing for the local crowd. Everyone seems to be into it. She's actually been really a media generator. What do you make of her inclusion here?
You know, she as I recall, she fought kickboxing never here in this building, but she fought kickboxing for Scott Coker years and years ago. Gilbert told me that she's been doing like smokers and things like that, like maybe once a year. That's not really on her record and stuff. So, but I mean, I remember Scott always going like, you know, before, you know, he ever had any idea of going back into kickboxing. And I mean, the other thing too with her is they're trying to groom her for MMA, but I think that they're going to put her in the kickboxing thing the first time and have her transition in MMA. And I think that they, you know, maybe they see her as a marketable fighter for their MMA, you know, for MMA, because they, you know, Scott's always been a big proponent of women fighting, but he doesn't really have the name women except for Marloes. You know, that's about the only one so far.
All right. Those are the fights. Those are the event overview. I'm not going to ask you for any predictions for ratings. I'm not going to ask you for any predictions beyond the tournament itself. What I am going to ask for is, what do you think the dominant headline will be once the event is over?
Well, if Tito wins, that's the dominant headline. If the tournament is a rousing success, that could be the headline. McGeary may make a name for himself if he does a dynamic win, which is very likely, or very, you know. But it's going to be some. Well, if the thing doesn't work, that could be the dominant headline too. If the kickboxing matches don't fly, but I think that it's going to be something out of, you know, the tournament lends itself to making a star, obviously, especially a one-night tournament. And the other part is that the winner of the tournament and the winner of the main event are likely to face each other in their next fights. So it's a very natural matchmaking. I mean, you've got a big show. You're going to have a lot of viewers, a lot more than usual. And the hope for thing, you know, the way it's planned is that the viewer is going to come out of this going, I want to see this tournament winner against this champion. This guy would be two top guys in one night against this guy who, whoever it is, either Tito scores this incredible upset or McGeary has beaten Tito. So I think that it's good matchmaking to build for something in the future.
Dave, this has been great. I appreciate the analysis. It's been very interesting to talk to you and to be here all week. It's been a very bizarre atmosphere, but I think a very fun one just the same. So, folks, that's Dave Meltzer. I'm Luke Thomas. You'd be wise to listen to him. And if you're curious about what's behind you, tune in on Saturday night on Spike TV at 9 p.m. Eastern. For Dave Meltzer, I'm Luke Thomas. At MMA Fighting, enjoy the fights.